Welcome to the Million Dollar Mission, the podcast for entrepreneurs that are focused on purpose and profit. I'm your host, Dr. Shantell, serial entrepreneur, nonprofit expert, wife, and mother. Welcome to episode 2 of season 1. I am so excited that you actually came back to chat with me. We had so much fun in episode 1, just talking about Million Dollar Mission and how we even got here, right? What is Million Dollar Mission and what does it mean for us? In episode 2, I want to talk to you all about something that sort of gets swept under the rug a lot in this social entrepreneurship, nonprofit leader, community advocate space. And that is taking on the role of a Black woman in this space. I'm going to get deep here. So, trigger warnings, white saviors, clique mentality, and being the only Black woman in white male dominated spaces. So, for episode 2, we're going to talk about gatekeeping, gaslighting, and girl bossing. Let's get into it. All right, let's get into gatekeeping, gaslighting, and girl bossing. So, as a Black woman, it's only right that I center Black women, period, on Million Dollar Mission, right? We're going to talk to the fellas too, but as a Black woman, I speak from a perspective that is unique, specifically because I have led in these spaces that are dominated by white men. And there's really two sides to this, right? It's this how we are operating within this male dominated, white dominated space, but then it's also a side of how we are interacting with each other. How are we as Black women, women of color, interacting with each other in these spaces uh, to make it, to be successful? A number that stands out to me literally daily is 1.6. I know you guys like trying to tell what the heck is 1.6. 1.6 is the amount of funding that a Black-led, woman-led organization typically gets funded at. What that means is if there's $1 million in available funding for organizations that are doing any type of community work, not necessarily nonprofit. It could be, small business and things of that nature. If there's $1 million available, of that $1 million, only about 1.6%, 1.6% is going to go directly to a Black-led, Black woman-led organization. That's the number that defines my role in this space. It's what defines me as a leader or as a change maker. It's what defines how we move through or navigate these lanes of being leaders in this space, right? It's where we start to begin to make our difference. However, what we've been doing, since we were brought to this country, and I'll say bought as a nicety, we have been operating in the shadows of a structure that we built, right? We Black women built this structure. It's not up for debate. You can't change my mind. Black women built this structure of America, of corporate, of business, of all of the things that we enjoy the spoils of now. Black women built it. And however, we've been operating in the shadows of that. And so what we've done is we have evolved how we act, how we speak, how we deliver, how we construct. We've evolved in order to successfully operate in these shadows. So whereas you see Black women are on the rise, they're starting more businesses than ever, they're leading more corporations than ever. We're still operating in the shadow of this white patriarchy, right? And so what happens is there begins to be this tradition or culture of gaslighting and gatekeeping. So you have all these women, all these Black women bossing up, bossing up, bossing up, but they are confined, their bosshood, bossiness is defined or confined by this army of either gaslighters or gatekeepers. And so I really want to lean into how gatekeeping has slowed down progress and innovation and growth for Black women in these spaces. And some will say, well, it's just, who works harder, who wins the race, who's the most popular. In a lot of entrepreneurship, especially social entrepreneurship spaces, there tends to be someone, some some initiative that rises to the top and they are donned or receive the title of the gatekeeper. They are the person who understands this landscape. They are the person who says who's doing it well and who's not doing it so well in this space. They are the ones who we seek for their stamp of approval. And so what happens is the gatekeeper, intentionally or unintentionally, begins to hold back everyone who's behind the gate. Everyone who's working in the same landscape, doing the same work, is now held to the standard of the gatekeeper. But what if your standard is leaps and bounds more innovative, more evolved than where the gatekeeper is, right? So instead of the gatekeeper going, I'm going to step aside or I'm going to make space and bring up someone else up to this echelon, I'm going to give you my stamp of approval and limit how far you can go because I've been deemed the gatekeeper. And again, sometimes this is intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. But I'm bringing this to this episode because my hope is that leaders in this space, in this social entrepreneurship space, especially in this nonprofit space, especially where we are competing for funds because we don't sell widgets, right? Women who are starting businesses in the shoe industry or the beauty industry, they do face the same challenges, but they're not competing for the funds in the same type of way. Their only goal or job is to sell the hottest shoe, right? There's no gatekeeper. The public determines who has the hottest shoe. In these social spaces, in these community spaces, there's no tangible item. There's not. So everyone is literally being sold upon how well can you serve? Do you have the stamp of approval? And so I bring this up because I really want people in this space, or it's Black women in this space. Let me be clear. I want Black women in this space to understand that gatekeeping in this space is actually a hindrance. It's actually a hindrance. What it should be is circle makers. Forget the gatekeeping. Gatekeeping just says one way in, one way out, and you have to have approval to go in out of here. The circle makers do their own thing, but they link, they align, they hold hands, they support, they create a chain that strengthens the circle. The larger the circle gets, the stronger the people in the circle, the more innovative the people in the circle, the stronger the circle gets. Your gates do not get stronger by how many people you keep behind it. In fact, they get weaker. The more people you herd behind these gates, the weaker the gate gets. It can't hold but so much. But then what happens is there isn't like an explosion of innovation and creativity. There's a mass exodus. There are people who get burnt out and they run. There are people who say, well, I'm just going to stay in this one space because it's been safe. There's not an explosion of innovation and creativity and talent when that gate falls, when that gate explodes. But in a circle, the larger it gets, the stronger it gets, the more creative people get because they can see in front of them, they can see behind them, they can see to the left and to the right. When you are herded into a square and you can only see like what's in front of you and you're trying to push your way to get to the gate because you want to be the gatekeeper or you want to be approved by the gatekeeper, you want the gatekeeper stamp of approval, you are stifling innovation and creativity and talent. And that's essentially what women in this space, especially Black women in this space, are recognizing. And it does boil down to this clique mentality. It's whoever is friends with the gatekeeper, whoever has received the stamp of approval from the gatekeeper, they get to stand up at the front of the gate and they get to receive whatever's thrown in when it's fresh. But the people who are all the way at the back are getting nothing. They're getting crumbs. They're getting nothing, right? And so this clique mentality is kind of destroying, not destroying. I'm not going to own that. I'm not going to own that because this space is resilient. This space in which we are serving communities and changing narratives and writing new stories and making sure that the underserved now eats at the same table with the wealthy. It's resilient, but we have to recognize the dangers that are are hindering its growth, right? And that gatekeeper mentality that this is the most successful not Black woman leading a nonprofit in this area. And she is going to tell us who all the other good Black nonprofits are. But what if she doesn't know who the best nonprofits are? We are confined to what she knows and what she accepts. And the responsibility, the onus is on Black women to say, I'm no longer going to be a gatekeeper, but I'm going to be a circle maker. I'm going to link arms. I'm going to stand next to other women in my same space, and we're going to link arms and we're going to build stronger circles and we're going to kick down gates. A lot of people may say, well, Shantell, you've experienced success in this space. You experienced success in this nonprofit landscape, in this community advocate space, in this social entrepreneurship space. And many may consider you a gatekeeper. What makes you different? What makes you a circle maker? And really, um, you know, the realization of the the consequences of gatekeeping really has affected my business and how I act and what's made me lean towards being a circle maker versus a gatekeeper. Um, I personally am very cautious as to where I step. And when I say that, I mean, you know, when I look at people who have achieved this girl boss status and who've achieved this gatekeeper status, how many relationships did you have to step on? How many promises or people did you have to step on to achieve that status? I am very careful where I step and how I conduct my business and how I choose to act and who I choose to engage with to ensure that my relationships are meaningful, that they are leading me to a space where even if you and I don't form a partnership, that we are acknowledging each other in this space. And I think that's the difference between gatekeeping and circle making. It's this, it's this acknowledgement and this mutual respect for what other people are doing in the space. And they don't require my stamp of approval and I don't require theirs. but there should be some acknowledgement and mutual respect happening here. Um, it's I make it very present in the conversations that I have. I don't typically shift from what I'm doing or what the goals of my work is in order to meet the standards of someone else. Um, because of that, my my achievements and my funding and my success and all of those things do tend to come from very non-traditional places, right? Of course, we do grant funding, we do fundraising. My consulting practice is for profit, but still social enterprise based. Where the nonprofit, I mean, my for-profit business, my consulting agency is very focused on community impact. We are developing organizations that are focused on changing communities and things of that nature. And so the conversations that I'm having are not about here's who I am, and here's what I can do for you, and here's what you need to do in order to win me. It is here's what I do, what is it that you do, and where do we overlap? Where do we align? How can we support? How can we partner? And if we can't support or partner each other because what we do simply doesn't align, can we acknowledge the work that we do? And can we form a mutual respect that the work that you do is equally as important as the work that I do? And so when you are operating from that space, how you do business is going to change. And this goes for any entrepreneur listening to this. I don't care if you sell shoes, bundles, or if you are feeding the homeless every day. When you come from a place where the work that you do is as equally important as the work that your neighbor does, you get to a space of circle making where you are building community links and chains that are much, much stronger than gates. Okay. You don't own the market of shoes. Sis, your bundles are just as good as the next chick's bundles, depending on who is consuming them, right? The service that I provide is equally as important as the service that someone else provides, even if it's more, could not be more different, right? They're equally important based on consumption. And we don't determine consumption, the consumer does, right? So if someone determines that today, me having a meal is more important than me getting job assistance, it does not make my work less important because the consumer determines what they need at that moment. And so, really, a lot of the work that I'm doing now to move away from gatekeeping is really to get to a place where my girl boss status is defined by ensuring that every consumer that needs what I have is being fed, is being fulfilled, is getting what they need. That is where my girl boss status is no longer determined by a plaque. It is no longer determined by a certificate. It's no longer determined by a feature. It is simply determined by the work that I'm doing and ensuring that the consumer's needs are being met. Because every entrepreneur, that's what we're here to do. We're here to solve a problem of a consumer, not our own problem. My entrepreneurship doesn't solve my personal problems. Typically, and this is just a, a form of humility, typically my problems are solved by someone else. It's solved by what someone else offers. It's solved by a service that someone else provides. Because in turn, I am a consumer. In the same way I'm a service provider, I am also a consumer. But you can't only eat your own cooking, sis. Like you gotta go out and eat someone else's cooking sometimes. You gotta go out and get something from a neighbor's garden sometimes. So make sure that your girl boss status isn't just defined by what you do and who's clapping. And that's where we move away from this gatekeeping and the inevitable gaslighting that comes from it, because it's all born in the same place. But as Black women in these spaces, we are making room, we are linking arms, we are igniting process. We are nurturing innovation in everyone, not just in ourselves, in every other Black woman that's in the space with you. Are you nurturing her innovation? Are you igniting her progress? Are you contributing to her growth? Because it will automatically come back to you tenfold. That you can't sit with us mentality will be the death of your legacy. Thank you for listening to episode 2 of Million Dollar Mission, the podcast for entrepreneurs that are focused on purpose and profit. I'm your host, Dr. Shantell Chainless, serial entrepreneur, nonprofit expert, wife, and mother. This podcast has been produced by Joy Donaldson. Until next time, stay on your mission.